Whenever a client compliments us on our work, I always return the compliment. I have a standard line, and that is you really can't have a good project without a good client. It's a great line, it plays well in a crowd, but it has the virtue also of being true. So the question becomes, when you become your own client, what kind of client will you be to yourself? So the story today is, partly about the Roost and about microhousing, about adapting it for affordability and for the community and to support an arts culture. But it's also about the adventure of being an architect and being a developer and walking for a little while wearing two pairs of shoes. I don't really think of myself as a developer per se, but development of our own projects has become an increasing part of our work. It's a lens through which we view the world now, and it has become how we view kind of the potential for possibility within our projects and the likelihood of the kind of things that we're trying to achieve. So let's talk about that. It's day one for the Roost. It's a blank piece of paper. What are we trying to achieve? Well, the first one is that this is our best chance to do our best design, right? This is like you don't want to take a whiff on this one. You want to aim for the fences. The next one is a huge buzzkill, which is that we need to put together a profitable project. Right? It has to be profitable. Without that, you can't attract investor capital. You can't find a way to get a bank to loan you money, and you certainly can't pay off those two when you're all done. So even if you're not motivated by profit, there's simply no way to get off the ground without structuring it into what you do. And the snappy way of putting that is that there is no mission without margin. We want our projects to have healthy living environments. We want them to sort of push the forward on sustainability, and we want them to be a contribution to the place in which they're made and make the city a better place. What we're trying to do is create things that we feel are relevant, and that's a pretty small target that we're aiming for. And one of the reasons I've expressed it as a Venn diagram is it kind of makes clear for you that by hitting the target that you're aiming at, it means that you necessarily have to miss the bullseye on all the other goals that you have. That success in this particular context means that you just get to graze the edge of all the things that you're trying to do. There's an old story there. A decade ago, there was no such thing as microhousing development in Seattle. Back then, if you were going to develop a small infill project, you were subject to a one-to-one parking requirement, strict density limits. If you had built more than 8 units, you were going to go through a large design review process. And so you really didn't. What got built at this scale in Seattle back then were townhouses. And in 2008, that kind of changed. There was a group of developers that had an insight that said, okay, if I am allowed to have 8 people share a home, then 8 people can also share a townhome. And if they can share an existing townhome, they could be able to share a new townhome. And so they used this as a way to kind of lever in this new type of development, which was building clusters of 8-bedroom, 8-bathroom townhomes that shared common kitchens. And that's how the Seattle microhousing was born. It caught fire real quickly and ramped up to the point where at its peak we were producing over 1,800 units of microhousing in a year. And then now along with that came a political backlash. In 2014, the city council stepped in and introduced new regulations that basically turned this river of low-priced housing into basically a trickle. Our part in the story, we didn't really have much of a part to play in the first chapter of microhousing. Our first project, the Yobi, didn't even get permitted until maybe a couple months before. Didn't even submit for permit until a couple months before the curtain rang down. There were design changes to the land use code that came around in 2011, and we saw in there the opportunity to do kind of a better version of this project. We saw ourselves as the microhousing 2.0 people. So now it's important to note that the earlier projects, they were important. They demonstrated a need for this type of housing. They demonstrated the utility for it, and that it was providing a whole bunch of affordable housing and a whole bunch of access for people to the city that they'd never had before. It just wasn't very handsome. And we were hoping to add sort of another layer of design to the projects. So Yobi was our first attempt. We completed it in 2015, and it kind of provides the basic template for all of our work going forward. It's 45 units on 5,200 square feet of land. It's a 4-story walk-up with a basement, and most of the units are provided in the top 3 stories with basic rooms as small as 140 square feet, some slightly larger ones at 180 square feet, and then some lofted units up top. The main floor is almost entirely devoted to common space. There's a shared living room, kitchen, dining, laundry, study area, TV lounge. The project has one way in and one way out, and that path takes you directly through the common areas, and it maximizes the opportunity for chance interaction among the residents. So these social spaces, these chore spaces, and the entry path are all intermingled, creating those opportunities. For example, the laundry is placed right next to the entry instead of being kind of tucked away in some place in the basement. So when you go to do your laundry, you run into people coming in and out the front door, and you can go sit in the living room and chill while you're waiting for your laundry to get done. And sometimes things happen. Upstairs, each individual private room is outfitted with the basics, and kind of only the basics of what you need for the private aspects of your life. There's a bed, a desk, a wardrobe, private bathroom, a small kitchenette that has a sink, a microwave, and a mini fridge. And on the top levels, there are these lofts. But cooking and dining and socializing, those are the things that are going to happen outside of your room. So there's a shared commons on each floor that has a kitchen and a dining table. And these are the places where you kind of get to know the dozen or so people on your floor a little better. We call these spaces pajama commons, and this is a term that we learned from Ross Chapin, who actually, while we were designing the project, he kind of called us out of the blue, and he kind of spotted some analogs between the work that he was doing on pocket neighborhoods and cottage communities, and saw this sort of urban housing analog to it. And it was Ross that kind of gave us the language and the framework for thinking about these projects. The most fundamental of which is that what we're trying to do in these projects is create layers of privacy. So the private room, the pajama commons, the fully public spaces, these are all layers in which you can kind of step forward or retreat back depending upon your kind of needs at a given moment. And this is a key to sort of well-being, psychological well-being within a shared environment like this. So just some pictures of the finished product at the Yobi, the private room. This is the pajama commons. This is one of these on every level, and then the main commons. That's enough background. Brings us to the Roost. So in 2015, we purchased this site in Rainier Valley. It's 4,000 square feet, 40 by 100. It's 2 blocks north of the I-90 lid and the future light rail station. We were really pleased with how Yobi was turning out, and we wanted to take a second bite at the apple, do it ourselves this time, and see how much further we could kind of push those ideas. By this point, we had designed several townhouse projects that were centered around community space, and we'd seen some of them succeed, but also seen some of them fail. And so we knew by this point that putting together a good solid partie and good bones was no guarantee that a community was going to form inside of that. So we decided to do a little bit of work on the front end to think about who we were going to design this for, to try to assemble a cohort that would be attracted to the building. You put together a group of people that had something in common, that would want community with each other. The little orange dot, I don't know if you can see it, is the site, and right next to that in yellow is Hiawatha Art Space. Hiawatha Art Space is Art Space is a group that does subsidized artist law, so they work on a national scale. This is sort of the platonic ideal of what people think about as artist housing. It's got really generous subsidized lofts. It's got a gallery and a community room and a coffee shop and a dance studio, and it is exactly what you think of as wanting to provide for artists for access to the city. It also at the time had 50 units and a 1,000-person waiting list. There are a whole bunch of organizations around this area that were providing both art services and schools and workspaces, and of course, just off to page left, there's the International District and the Pioneer Square that has all the galleries. So we looked at this as sort of an opportunity for us to create a micro-housing analog to what Art Space had started, to bring more artists to the block, add a little bit more vitality and energy to what they had started. So we've kind of established the who we're designing for, and now here's the what. So our starting point was a building kind of, similar to the Yobi, where we have 3 stories of units upstairs, about 45 units total. On the main floor, we created a large shared studio. It has a lounge, a shared kitchen, a shared laundry. It's all mixed together in one big space with a bunch of work tables. Now, this is like one big room with lots of people working on it, lots of messy vitality, sort of a merry band of pirates kind of a thing that you're looking for. And it's probably an obvious solution that an architect would jump to, because this is the kind of environment that we all went to school in. So we took this idea and we went out to a bunch of nonprofits that provide working space for artists, and we kind of talked to them about what they thought about the concept, and they were really clear with us that they thought this was a terrible and unworkable idea. Artists do their thing. They use a variety of media. They work at odd hours. They own a lot of expensive tools. They're protective of their work. They've got big personalities. They've got complicated lives. And so the form in which these organizations were providing them workspace was 4 walls, a door, and a lock. So they also helped us get directly in touch with working artists through a survey we sent out, and we got some other important feedback. The first one was that the artists that we talked to placed a whole lot more value on the potential to live with other artists than to work with other artists. That was the thing that they were looking for. The second thing was that arts organizations loved what we were proposing, really excited about it. Artists themselves, really not so much, and that's a polite way of putting it. They were really suspicious of our motives, of the value of what we were proposing, and really kind of viewed the thing as some kind of a nefarious art washing scheme on our part. They weren't sure how they were getting played, but they knew they were getting played. And it just helped us set our expectations for what kind of a reception we would get with our ideas going forward. We rethought the basic organization of the project. So rather than provide this large common workroom, we redistributed that area into the units so people could work and live within their unit. We got rid of a story and turned those 3 stories into 2 and made them double height so that you could lift the bed space up and out of the lower level, and then basically take the living room and repurpose that as a workspace if you wanted to do that. Now, we gave up a level of our building. We reduced a 45-unit building to a 33-unit building. Our typical unit went from 160 square feet to 220 square feet. And so we ended up at sort of a different balance point in terms of weighing the sort of livability and the affordability of the project. Now, with so many units at the sort of relatively large and expensive end of the microhousing spectrum, it became important to us that we find a way to get deeper affordability into the project. So this is where the multifamily tax exemption program comes into play. So we participated in that, and that allowed us to offer 9 of our units at a significant discount relative to market. So we have 9 units that rent for $700 a month compared to the rest of the units, which those typical lofts rent for about $1,200 a month. So kind of here's where we sort of ended up on the organization of the building. The main floor on the left-hand side of the page is the residential commons. It's got the kitchen, living, dining area, mail room, laundry room, entries all kind of mixed together so that those paths cross, like at the Yobi. But the majority of the main floor is given over to a commercial space. And what we were looking for there was to find some kind of an arts organization, a nonprofit that could take the space. We would offer it up at a subsidized price, but we wanted to attract some organization to the building that could provide services or cultural activities that were meaningful to artists, so that not only would they provide day-to-day activity within the space that would help kind of enliven the place, but would also secure an arts identity for the building, would help people believe that we were serious about creating an arts building. On the upper levels, it's where the lofted units go. There's a little common kitchen off to the right. That's kind of it's a little bit more modest than at the Yobi, but it's the sort of a place if you're going to make yourself eggs and toast, you're going to make it in that kitchen. If you're going to have friends over, you're going to go downstairs. There's 4 types of units within the plan. So the north units are different than the south units, and the ones on the ends and the corners are different as well. So there's a little bit of variety in the kind of types of subtle offerings that there are within the units. So I like Venn diagrams. Just to kind of revisit where we are. So at this point, we've established our goals. We know who we're designing for. We've sussed out the basic schematic design for the project. We've established a clear organizational party. So this is, we have reached a moment of clarity at this point. And, we know what we're doing. We know why. We feel ready. You probably know what this feels like, and you probably know what's coming next. It feels like love. But if you've been there, you also probably know this is not the way you diagram this stage of the process. It looks like this. And you know what's coming next. So, 2015 was the beginning of a multi-year run-up in construction cost, and we went through this series of really painful kind of value engineering exercises where every 6 months we would reprice the project, discover we had blown through the ceiling, VE the project, and just turn around and do it again 6 months from now. So we gave up a lot of things along the way. We originally had hoped that we'd get this project Passive House certified. That was one of the first things to go by the wayside. Sloan, I congratulate you. You really you pulled something off there. And we were able to hold on to Built Green 5-star certification, and we were able to hold on to a solar array that provided the hot water of the project. But we really had to downscale some of our ambitions in that regard. Our original cladding design, we featured ironwood and perforated stainless steel, and we modestly value engineered that down to painted hardy. And the design review board was really happy to see us come back with that ask. And generally speaking, we just, we really had to kind of scale our ambitions down and focus on just a few things. And so that VE process really helped us focus on what were some of the things that we really were willing to work to hold on to. One of them was this kind of a fun little thing that developed within the project, which is the flooring. Almost every multifamily project uses LVT flooring. It's a luxury vinyl tile. Don't know why it's called that, but it's cheap, it's durable, and it's sort of good enough looking that it's basically taken over the whole multifamily industry. And it only comes in one form, which is that it's all fake wood flooring, and that comes from a photo print of wood. And we went out and looked for a company that would allow us to use our own photo print so we could kind of put something else into that. And we spent the fall of 2017 tromping around our neighborhood, gathering up the sticks and leaves and rocks and piling them in my backyard and photographing them, trying to find some kind of a natural floor that would have the warmth and appeal of wood, but it would be sort of demonstrably fake and celebrating that. And what we kind of came to were these cedar fronds that we found. We photographed them once. We liked the color, but we got the scale wrong. We came back to photograph it a second time, and we discovered these little green shoots growing up through that, and that became the final floor that we used throughout the units and the common areas. There's a lot of value engineering is just having to kind of live with the cost cuts, but some of the ways that these projects get trimmed back is that they become vanilla by nature because the clients are sort of looking for them to be neutral so that they're appealing to or inoffensive to the largest number of people. We didn't have any client telling us to do that, and we sort of took advantage of that, and we got very experimental with the colors that we used, and we tried really hard to, where the opportunity was there and it wasn't really a cost issue, we just tried new things. Every one of the floors has a different color scheme in the common areas. If there was a new product out there to try, and we just took a crack at it. And some of the experiments worked out, some of them didn't, but we put a premium on trying new things and seeing what happened, and less on sort of being precious about each individual decision. The casework was one area we were able in the project to hold on to the original thing we wanted to do, which was to build them out of AC plywood to create that sort of informality, and get the warmth of wood, and create that sort of loft aesthetic that we were looking for. Managed to hold on to that one. But of all the sort of countless trimmings that we went through, it really kind of helped form this idea of what this North Star that we were doing, which was that designing the project well was really how we made manifest that we kind of honor and value and dignify the lives of the people that come to live in our project. And it was a form of respect that we were paying forward to them. The loft stair was it continues to be a really difficult design problem within these types of projects. It's this triage element between the amount of space you give to it and the sort of the ergonomics of it and making the geometry work. I can't say we ever found the right compromise. We've studied any number of ways to try to do this, and in the end, the project used a variety of kind of laid back ladders and over steepened stairs. We tried the sort of alternating tread Jefferson stair and turned out to be a sort of horrible knee banger that didn't work out. But and in future projects, we're looking at things that fold and slide and all kinds of various things. But this is a really difficult part of sort of making small units work. The units got really simplified because every cost element there is multiplied times 33, but the common areas were the place where we really worked on trying to hold the line. There are fewer of them, so focusing our design budget on those spaces gave us the sort of best chance to make the biggest impact. And we not only focused on making them nice, but on thinking about the usability. So when you go down to the kitchen to use the kitchen, you open up the drawers, what you're going to find is it's stocked just like your kitchen at home. It's got pots and pans and knives and measuring tools. And when you open the refrigerator and the cupboards, you're going to find that there's all the basic sundries are there that allow you to just sort of walk into the kitchen and go. You got to bring your own chicken, you got to bring your own eggs, but you don't have to go bring your own salt and ketchup and oil and flour. It's all there and it's all ready for you. So we get to August of 2018. We're done with our project. We're ready to open the doors, and there's this big sort of moment of existential dread hanging over the whole thing, which is that we've been talking for 3 years about creating housing for artists, but there's no way to make the artists come, and there's no way to keep people who aren't artists out. So this is a bit of a problem, and so We have some strategies, we have some things we're working on, but we don't know they're going to work. And so there's this kind of a dread hanging over the whole thing that this may, at the end of this, lead to this very, very conspicuous failure. So in addition to that, we're also looking at a construction loan that needs to be paid back. And long and the short, by the end of the year, we kind of really need to get this project stabilized. Otherwise, we're going to have some money troubles. So we did a little bit of strategizing, and we decided to make a calculated risk that we would spend the first 2 months of the project and we would not generally advertise the building. We did all of our advertising through the social networks of nonprofits, through their social media. We did postcards and pamphlets, in art stores and outside art schools. Anywhere where we could sort of do this kind of guerrilla marketing and get to artists first is where we did our work. And just as before, the feedback was just absolutely brutal. The Facebook comments were really dispiriting. A lot of people tore down our posters and kind of gave us the stink eye outside the store and that sort of thing. But thankfully, as it turns out, Facebook trolls and sidewalk bullies are not necessarily representative of the population at large. And as we kind of moved through August, the building did start to lease up. And by the time we hit our cutoff at October 1, the building was more than half full, and it was mostly artists that were living in it. The commercial space was another challenge. It was, by the point we got to the lease up, we'd already been working with the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture for over 2 years, trying to find a match for the space. They were absolutely fabulous partner in doing this, and we had a whole series of first dates and second dates with a bunch of nonprofits. But we were really we weren't having any luck and starting to wonder if we hadn't sort of invented some kind of mythical, charismatic megafauna of nonprofit that could take this space, and questioning whether or not we were going to be able to pull it off. In September, we finally got lucky, and we were introduced to a media lab called Amplifier. You may not know who Amplifier is, but you certainly know their work. They're the folks that created all the iconic imagery that you saw at the 2017 inauguration and the Women's March protests. They were our snuffleupagus. They were our perfect dream tenant. We worked together to sort of make it happen, and by January of 2019, we'd brought them on board. We did a post-occupancy survey of our resident group, got really good feedback from them, really, really high return rate. I feel confident about the data that we have. One of the questions we asked is, why did they choose the Roost? And by far and away, the answer was that they had come because of the emphasis on the arts, and they had come seeking community, which was really, rewarding and confirming that it wasn't just for us, drinking our own Kool-Aid. The lofts were a huge part of the appeal. People, they kind of, they loved them. They felt special to them. Made them feel unique for having chose them. They liked how the separation of the bed space worked, and it was really great confirmation of the design concept. And the verticality of that space is this really unique experience. They're actually taller than they are in the Z dimension than they are in the X and the Y. And when you're up in those lofts, it's this feeling like you're looking out over a territorial view. It's just your unit. But it triggers that same part in our reptile brain that seeks out spaces of prospect and refuge. It's a very appealing experience. The Roost is 70% working artists. It's very good for housing that's open and available to everyone. More than half the people there are coming out of a shared roommate situation. For For a lot of folks, the Roost was an opportunity to move closer to the city core. About half the folks were moving within the city, but about a third of the folks were moving from exurbs and suburbs. So we got a lot of folks moving in from Tacoma and Auburn, which is a really encouraging sign. It's exactly what you're hoping these projects do, is they open up opportunity for people to move into the city. Cohort is nowhere near as young as you'd guess. It's the average age is 33. 62% of the people are over 30. We've got 3 single parents. We've got 1 couple. We've got 2 empty nesters. It's significantly more women than men. Now we have 9 dogs living in the project. And transportation-wise, people get around just like everyone else. About half of them take the bus to work. Only a quarter of people own a bike. And the car ownership rate is shocking. It's 70%. I would have never guessed that. I think it might have something to do with the fact that the Roost is in a neighborhood where it's just not that hard to park your car, and so there's not a whole lot of incentive to get rid of it when you go there. But so designing and developing your own project, it's this sort of exhilarating and terrifying experience all rolled up into one. I hope you got a sense for it a little bit. And it's a test of your ability to execute at your highest level, but also to make these tough decisions yourself when there's no client around to pin it on. And it's, I describe it as this opportunity to be both the best version of yourself and to bankrupt your family, and it's all wrapped up in it's one indivisible package. You can't separate the two. So it's not for everyone, but if you think it could be for you, I'd really encourage you to explore that impulse. And if you want to talk to me about it, I'm happy to tell you my experiences some more. That's my up note. There is a down note to it, which we'll call it a call to action, which is that we set out to develop something that was replicable, a model that other people could follow. But changes to the land use code have made it increasingly unlikely that others will be able to follow in our footsteps, even us. We talked about the changes in 2014 that kind of decimated the production of congregate housing. I mean, literally reduced it by about 90%. The reason is that when you're looking for land for congregate, you have to find land where both congregate is permitted, that's in an urban village, it doesn't require parking, and that the height limit is something where a walk-up building can kind of make reasonable economic use of the land. And this is a map of what that reservoir looked like in 2014. So the green is urban village. The rust color is the land that met those criteria I just described. I'm going to turn it sideways so we can get a better see more of it. So that's what we had in 2014 when we were producing lots of congregate housing. After 2014, the map changes to look like this. It's a massive reduction in the amount of land that sort of meets a criteria where you can build congregate housing. That's why we've seen the huge reduction. So this is the bad news, but this is really old bad news. I have new bad news, which is that a month ago we passed mandatory housing affordability, which upzoned a lot of this land into heights that are either it's not feasible to do walk-up housing, or change it to a zone where it's not allowed. And so the map changes again, and it's a little hard to see because we're talking about small areas, but it changes from this to that. So I'll go back one more time because we're talking about small areas. You need a bigger screen for this, but it's literally almost gone. So that's where we are today. Seattle was a national leader in microhousing. It showed the world how much demand there is for this housing type and how useful it can be in providing market rate affordability. In 2014, we zoned it into obscurity, and as of April 19th, 2019, I would say it's been zoned into extinction. We think this type of housing is terrific. We'd like to build a whole lot more of it, and we'd like others to be able to follow us in our footsteps. We're working with the City Council to try to, on a legislative agenda, to try to fix some of these problems, but this is not something that we can do alone. If you're an AIA member, ask the Public Policy Board to get involved. If you're affiliated with a housing nonprofit or a social justice organization, your groups are the folks that really have the ability to make an impact in this conversation. No one at City Hall cares, is going to be motivated to fix the microhousing mess by testimony of a microhousing developer. But if that message came from Capitol Hill Housing or Puget Sound Sage or the Renters Commission, that's a different type of story. I hope you liked the project. I was really honored to have a chance to share it with you today. And so thank you very much.
You guys still own and manage the project?
Yes, that was really part of the Roost, which was we wanted to develop, but then operate it, and it's become our little kind of a skunk works where we use it to figure out how these things really work in real life, how the operations of the building kind of feed back into the design. So we are operating it now, and it's our intention to operate it in the long term and continue to learn from it.
Hey, David, great presentation as usual. Could you talk a little bit more about, because I think the particular challenge of eliminating a floor and still making the project feasible, you made it sound so easy and simple. I know that's not. That's how it is. And I think those are the things we need to illustrate to the general public at large that comes, why can't we just take off a floor? Why can't we do this? So could you talk about how you were able to, what were either some of the innovations or sacrifices you made to eliminate basically a third of your units or 25% of your units?
Sure thing. First of all, I just want to say you just can't have a great presentation without a great audience. The punchline, I mean, to kind of cut to the end of it, the sacrificing of a floor, you know, if I were able to kind of peel it back and see the whole thing from, you know, from front to end, it was probably, you know, more economically disastrous than we understood it to be at the time that we decided on it. We had the idea that the Roost was built on cheap land, that our kind of, you know, our soft cost and our kind of the basis of the building was low enough that we didn't have to worry too much about the utilization of the project. I think that was, you know, in the end a fallacy. I mean, we kind of struggled with that all the way along. You know, so some of the struggles we had with value engineering and having to trim our ambitions were coming from, you know, some of the party that we set up. But you know, it led to an interesting building. It's, you know, I think it could work in places. But it is one of those things where urban land is really expensive, and the process of developing is so, it just, you know, that first unit costs so much that, yeah, underutilization of your project is usually the death knell for it. And we managed to survive it, but it's not a blanket recommendation I would make to people.
What were the square foot costs, and was there a prototypical premium cost associated with that? And what were some of the primary political objections that resulted in the reversal of the zoning that allowed?
Okay, well, hit the easy one, which is the cost of the building was around, construction of it was maybe $300 a square foot. The total development cost with all soft cost and land is, you know, around north of $400 a square foot. So, you know, these are buildings, they are more expensive to build than conventional multifamily. There's a lot of the really expensive parts of the building, not so much of the cheap parts of the building, which is just, you know, the open square footage. So, you know, you do hear from people that they rent for a lot per square foot. That's a common objection. It's also true that they cost a lot per square foot to build and a lot per square foot to operate. You know, the objections, you know, they range from the sort of well-meaning paternalism to the self-interested NIMBY objections to them. But, you know, what they kind of come down to is that they're you know, land use politics in cities are, you know, sometimes they feel like a zero-sum game. There are people that are the losers of transformation and change, and oftentimes the people who lose in that equation are people that are already here and already comfortable, and so they have, you know, they have political power and they have the ability to resist the type of transformational change that benefits newcomers but makes people that are here uncomfortable, and that's, you know, largely the story of microhousing. It's, you know, an enormously valued resource for the people that need it, but for the people that don't, not so much.
I think we're out of time. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thanks so much.